What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 223 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. Today, I want to talk to you about something that is very different than what I usually talk about on my channel. This is Safe Area Gorazde by Joe Sacco. This is an autobiographical story about when Joe Sacco was in this small little city called Gorazde that was deemed to be a safe area during the political, I don't want to say war, it was almost a Cold War. There was some killing going on, there was some violence, but to the outside world, it was played off as not a full-blown war. But Gorazde is near Sarajevo, so if you are familiar with the geography of some of the smaller nations of our planet, then you have a pretty good idea of where Gorazde was. But Joe Sacco, he was an American journalist who was sent to this area basically to report on how things were going in this small little area, and this chronicles roughly 4 years of what life was like in this part of the world during this little war that was going on. I don't mean to call it little and belittle what was going on then, because this book shows that it was a pretty crappy time of the 90s. It was really not as small as what the people in charge were trying to play it off as. There is a lot of stuff here that is really heavy. That's why I say it's very different from what I usually talk about. Usually I'm talking about science fiction-y, fantasy things. This is a real-life thing. And one thing that's interesting about this, compared to some of the other autobiographical comic books that I've read, is that Joe Sacco tries to downplay his own role in this, because it really isn't about him. It's about what he was observing. And he did put himself into this story, but he isn't the focus of this story. The focus of this story is what was happening and all these other people that he met in Gorazde and how all of these events were affecting these people. And I like this story a lot. It is not something that you're just going to take off the shelf one day and say, you know what, I'm feeling like reading about some war and how it ruined the lives of all these people in this city. You have to be in the right mindset to read this book. And it is not a very enjoyable book, but it is definitely a book that I feel like a lot of people living in a first world country should read. You know, we have this thing today, first world problems, like, oh man, I went to the grocery store today and they didn't have the kind of donuts that I like, and that just ruined my day. Can you believe it? First world problems are never going to go away. As long as people like me and people like you are living in the first world, and we have these comparatively minor problems that affect us, and we think, man, this is just the worst, these problems are never going to go away. More specifically, people complaining about these problems, that is never going to go away. But I feel like if more people read books like this and understood, okay, there's some really serious stuff that's going on with people outside of America that's really important and really is a big deal compared to they didn't have the kind of donuts that I wanted at the store today, I think, like I said, first world problems is never going to go away, but I feel like people would be able to put their problems a little bit more into perspective if they read a book like this. And of course, the events of this book are a good 20 years away by now, but this kind of thing is still happening all over the world today, unfortunately. And that's why this book is still very topical today. Even though the exact events that happened in this book happened a good 20 years ago, I was just a child when all of this was going on, about 5-ish years old or so, I still think that this book is very important, very necessary for people to read today. It's a slow read. It's not something that I would recommend you try and burn through in a few days. What I ended up doing, I would read about 20 pages a day. I felt like that was a good pace because I was going to depress myself if I read too much of this in one sitting. So I felt like reading it chunk by chunk was a good way to get through this. It's not something that, like I said earlier, you're not going to enjoy reading this, but it is something that I feel like everyone should read. This is something that, if you're like me, you complain about stuff all the time. I really wish that I could find a way not to do that as much. And I think that reading a book like this really makes it easier for me to realize, you know what, my life isn't that bad. I have it pretty good, even considering all the things that I do complain about. I really like this book. Even though it is about some really horrible stuff that was going on in the world at that time, I still like the way that it ends. It feels like it finds an organic way to find a happy ending. And that's a really weird thing to say considering all the stuff that this book depicts, but the way this book ends, I like the positive spin on the ending, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So definitely go ahead and try and find this book if you can. This is something that I think just about everyone who complains about stuff in their everyday life should read, and maybe it would put something into perspective for you, like I feel like it did for me just a tiny bit. So those are my thoughts on Safe Area Gorazde. I hope that you guys liked this video, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow with a different kind of autobiography comic. I'm going to do a few of these in a row. So look forward to that tomorrow. In the meantime, I am the Comics Kid 2099, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one.